The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB TV. Hot topics, food, fun, entertainment, and serious business. Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.
You know, it's always a good time, folks, when I have Ken Foose on as my guest from Exotic Pets. And in this crate to the side, you can kind of see it off to the side of Ken. It is a secret weapon. Now, every time I have Ken as a guest, he always promises that the pets he brings on are not going to A, attack me or molest me in any way, or B, break for freedom. If you watch the last show he was on, the birds broke for freedom. I think one flew over the cuckoo's nest, which is also known as John Stiles.
Yes.
Our owner, right. And so, yeah, we had to bring him back. And today's special guest in that crate is supposedly so sweet that the secret weapon, before we unveil him, are these heavy-duty gloves. Right? Yeah, this is a sweetheart who's not going to do me any damage at all. We're going to talk about the porcupine, a baby porcupine, who is our feature. But first, for those of you who don't know Ken Foose, he is the man here in Southern Nevada when it comes to exotic pets. He has everything. He's got snakes. He's got geckos. He's got kinkajous, maybe. He's going to get some more. He's got all kinds of birds are his new big thing now. He has like this big macaw that got bought like that, and so we'll be showing you some pictures of those things. But if you're thinking about getting an exotic pet and you just want to kind of see what's available and you want to see if you can actually care for this pet, Ken is the man to talk to here, not just in Southern Nevada, but across the country and around the world. Now, you don't just get your pets from here in the U.S. I mean, you're global.
Yeah, they're shipped in from all over the world.
Yeah, wow.
Like we have a shipment. It takes a while to get the permits, but we've got like monkey tail skinks coming in from the Solomon Islands.
What's a monkey tail skink?
I'll have to bring one in. It's a big lizard with a big prehensile tail.
Uh-huh.
But they're hard to get, and we're having them shipped in from the Solomon Islands, but there's a lot of permits involved and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, we ship things in from all over the world.
Right. So now, if somebody were to come to your shop today, aside from the porcupine, which we're going to show you in a minute, what could they expect to walk into?
Well, we specialize in reptiles and amphibians,
Right.
of course, as you know. So we've got probably 3,000 animals in the building. Most of those are reptiles and amphibians, but we've got some interesting birds like the hornbills.
Now, you just like kind of started branching out recently into birds. You got like a whole part of your shop now that's dedicated to birds.
Yeah, we always carried small birds,
Right.
like finches and canaries, but I'm not really knowledgeable on birds. So finally I found someone who can help me with the birds,
Mm-hmm.
and she's taken over the bird department. So, the first thing she did was order 60 baby birds, and watching her hand feed 60 baby birds I'm happy I'm not doing that. I'll stick to snakes. But so right now, of course, birds are kind of off season,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't have a lot. But this fall we'll have a lot more, and then they go off season again until spring, and then we get a lot more. I'm learning all this bird stuff as it goes along. And mammals are real seasonal. Of course, most of those are born in the spring, but it depends on what mammal, because in some places in the world, spring is opposite
Right.
of us. So we've got some really nice mammals. We've got some possums in, and because of the heat,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't understand that the airlines that ship animals into us have a heat threshold that they won't go over, so they won't allow any mammals or birds to be shipped when it's over 80 degrees.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
For this
for
part of
Las
the country,
Vegas,
it's going to be that way for a while.
and they just lowered it from 100 to 80, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. We thought we'd be able to start getting animals in around the end of August, because the average high on August 31st is 99 degrees.
Right.
We thought, well, we'll be okay, but now
Yeah.
they've dropped it to 80. So we're probably not looking at being fully stocked again until the end of September, maybe early October.
Right. But in terms of the potential pet owners, that's actually a pretty good thing, because if they're getting these pets, they're going to have to learn too what the heat threshold is.
Well, and that's the biggest problem in Las
Right.
Vegas with pets is the heat. The cold isn't really that bad.
Right.
Some reptiles you can't keep outside in the winter, but a lot of people don't understand how really hot it gets, really, really fast. we have people that'll buy a bearded dragon. Now, bearded dragon, which we've had on the show before, their preferred basking temperature is about 110, 120 degrees. But when they reach that threshold, they move into the shade, and then they move back out in the sun. And basically, these lizards and snakes, too, move in and out of the shade and sun all day to maintain a body temperature they like. You put a bearded dragon in a glass tank out in the middle of the backyard, and you'll usually last about 10 or 15 minutes,
Right.
and he's dead.
Right.
And, of course, it's the same way with dogs. You
Right.
got to have water and shade for the dogs, too. The funny thing I always didn't realize for a long time is, like, the weather gauge is like at the airport, the official temperature at the
Yes.
airport. When it says it's 110 or 115 degrees, that's in the shade.
Right.
And that thermometer is in the shade. You go out, and I put a temp gun on my parking lot in the middle of July, and the temperature on the asphalt is like almost 300 degrees.
Right.
And people don't, you were talking about your dog and your doggy
Right.
shoes.
Right.
People don't understand how hard it is on these animals. The easiest thing to do is walk out to your pool barefoot.
And you'll find out.
Yeah.
Well, I had Dr. Debbie White from Lone Mountain Animal Hospital and Lamar Jackson, who owns Calling All Pets, a grooming salon, on my last show. And that's one of the things that I really wanted them to talk about, because I think I shared with you, and I shared with you before this show, my own experience recently. I thought that because I had the air conditioner in the car just blowing, blasting, it's freezing in the front seat. So I've got, Behemoth 1 and Behemoth 2 in the back, Apollo and Akira, double-coated Akitas. I'm shooting the promo, and I'm, messing up time after time. So I'm on take 3 or 4, and all of a sudden I hear, coming from the back. I was cold in the front. They were hot in the back. So, those vents weren't really reaching out, and there was 2 of them. I said, oh, babies, we're going home. And so I thought, what, I bet I'm like a lot of people, and I see a lot of this when I'm out shopping. People think that because they're in the car and the air conditioning is blowing, that their animal is okay too, and maybe not.
It's tough, and at least with mammals, they get thermal regulated by panting.
Right.
Even a kangaroo or a wallaby, when they overheat, they can't pant like a dog. They spit all over their arms, their forearms, and the evaporation of that saliva is what helps cool them down.
Right.
Reptiles and amphibians, well, of course, especially amphibians, but reptiles can't thermal regulate naturally.
They can't tell you.
They have to. Well, they'll tell you when they flip over and die, but they have to move out of the sun. So yes, so the airlines are still shipping reptiles even in this heat, because we pack with cold packs, and we use styrofoam boxes, like the fish boxes, and so we know how to do it right. Mammals, there's really not much you can do. And the problem is, it's not the plane, because the temperature in the luggage compartment of the plane is the same temperature in the cabin.
Right.
It's all the same. The pressure is the same. The temperature's the same, because you got to remember, these planes are flying at 30,000 feet, and it's 40 below zero up there. But inside the plane itself, it's all a uniform temperature. The real problem is when the plane lands, getting it off the tarmac, getting it from the plane to the freight building. And that usually takes about 20 minutes.
And that tarmac that's been baking.
And that's,
all day.
300 degrees.
Right.
And that's where you lose your animals. So the safety record on planes is not a problem, but you lose them in that 20 minutes, and that's where it gets bad. So that 20 minutes could kill a dog, that could kill a reptile, that could kill anything. So they ban the reptiles from being shipped when the temperature's too hot. I wish they kept it at 100 degrees.
Sure.
But they didn't, and there's not much choice. Delta's the only airline really shipping animals anymore.
Right.
So here we are.
Well, it's a good health concern. And, for those people who are coming to you now, and honestly, I think I'm one of those people until I really started doing self-education when I met you. I think there's an assumption with reptiles and especially with snakes and lizards, that they can deal with the hot temperatures. Like this morning, I saw one of my, lizard favorites, hanging out. He was out there, with the dragonflies and everything. But then I found myself thinking, well, if my babies are too hot and they're not outside, it's really hot. And so maybe for this lizard, let me not make this assumption, because he was in the shade, and also I'm sure that there are many areas in my backyard, because I've got trees and shrubs and all that type of thing, where they can find coolness. But I think that there is an assumption among some people who aren't familiar with these species that they watch TV shows and they see these reptiles and you know, these animals out in the wilderness. They think, well, they must be okay with the heat.
Well, like the lizard, this was, I assume, this morning. Because what will happen is when the sun comes up and starts heating up the wall or the rocks or whatever, they'll come out and they'll bring their body temperature up to 100 degrees.
Okay.
And then they go sit in the shade and they cool down and then they'll go back out. But as soon as it gets up to like 100 degrees outside, they're gone. They're gone for the rest of the day.
Right.
They usually don't show up again until the next morning.
Right.
So people who keep tortoises outside, especially
Yes, let's talk
this
about
time
the
of year.
tortoises, because I've got a lot of friends who have tortoises and who are new to the whole tortoise game.
Well, people that keep tortoises right now, we sell Russian tortoises, which are very similar in habitat to the desert tortoises here. But the desert tortoise is the same way. When we sell someone Russian tortoises, we always recommend that they be housed outside. And dig a burrow, just like a desert tortoise, and build them a pen so they can't wander down the street. And set them up. Or you can set them up indoors, then you need the heat lamps and the UV lights and all the extra stuff. When they're buying them for like their children, I usually say, well, if you want to be interactive with the animals, you keep them indoors. Because the way it works is in the spring, these tortoises are running around the pen all over the place. It's not too hot. They're eating. They're looking for
Having
mates.
a good time, right.
Having a good time. When summer hits, they're in the burrow because it's too hot. They come out at dawn and they eat. And when it gets too hot, they go in the burrow and they're done. And so unless you're coming out when the sun rises, you're not going to see the tortoise. Then in the fall, they're running around all over because the temperature's just right. And then in the winter, they're down
there,
and they're gone. I mean, I've seen desert tortoises and other hibernating tortoises that have emerged on an 80-degree day in December when we get those really rare flukes, and they'll sit at the entrance and they'll bask a little bit. So you got to remember 3 days later it's going to be 40 degrees again and they're down in the burrow. So if you've got these animals outside, that's great and it's natural for them, but you're never going to see them. Whereas if you take that same tortoise, I'm not saying desert tortoises, they should always be maintained outside, but these smaller Mediterranean tortoises, you can maintain them indoors as long as you've got them set up right with the proper heat. Now, what some people are doing is taking their Russian tortoises and they've set them up with a pen outdoors, but in the fall they're going to bring them inside and then add the lights and the heat so that they'll have them all year round. Hibernation is, or brumation, which is the proper term for it, is not really a result of a need. It's a complete result of weather. And weather is going to dictate whether these animals are going to go down or not. If it's warm year-round indoors, they're just going to think it's perpetual summer. They don't have a calendar. But is it better for them to live a natural rhythm? Probably, but it's hard to say.
If you're into that animal, like I've got a brother who's just, first time I ever saw the setup, I mean, he really went for it. He's got the lights and the whole nine yards, and they've got the whole thing taking up all this space. And I'm watching them cavort, and it's like, well, what made you decide? I grew up in them. I didn't know he was into tortoises until I saw the whole setup. It's like, this is fantastic. And then he explained what you explained. This is how you have to care for them if you're going to have them indoors. And I just didn't even think about the whole environmental aspect of having them outside, and you're not going to see them. I actually had a friend of mine at the time gave me her adult desert tortoise, so we did the whole burrow thing. And the only time, his name was George, he would ever come out, on the off season, was if he heard my mother. He had this thing from my mother's voice, and she would come and she'd say, George, he never came out for me, but he would say, oh, no, she's here. She's here. He'd come scampering out, he'd do his little thing, say hi, and he'd go right back in.
He knows who has the food. And that's what I said. They're attracted to all kinds of sounds. When you have, I have the big Galapagos tortoises. When they were housed here before we moved them to Arizona, they would actually hear the car pull up.
Wow.
And they're all waiting for us to come around back and scratch their necks and and feed them, but they mainly want food. They really don't.
Not you.
It's not me. No, they just want food.
That's not a problem. When people come to your shop, can you tell right away whether they know what they're getting into, or people who just think, this is really cute, or, like who might go to my brother's house and go, it looks so easy.
It's hard. It's almost as hard as deciding who's going to spend money or not. We've had customers that have come in not dressed very well, and the staff would tend to ignore them, and I'm like, but that's how I dress when I'm not at work.
Right.
So, and you can never tell who's going to buy what. As far as knowledge goes, most of our customers don't know what they're buying. They come in and they want a bearded dragon, or they want a new snake or whatever, and we have to pretty much show them step by step how to take care of it. Some people will say, "Oh, that's not for me."
Right.
Some people are willing to spend the money. That's the real problem with all this is we sell like small turtles or the Russian tortoises, and they ask, well, how much is all this going to cost? And I say, well,
it's not just the pet; it's all of the stuff you need to take care of.
Well, yeah, and that's where we actually make our money.
Right.
We don't make much money off the animals,
right,
because by the time you got done feeding water and electricity and calcium supplement and staff and cleaning the cages and changing the bedding, we're pretty much in the hole on the animals.
Right.
It's the equipment that costs the money. But you look at a $20 turtle, and they say, how much is it going to cost to set it up? And I said, it's going to be $150 minimum.
Right.
Well, they think they're just going to take this little turtle and put it in a plastic box and go home with
Right.
it. And we, of course, won't let them. And we do have a warranty. If you buy the complete setup, we do give you a warranty if we know you can take care of it properly. But we have a lot of people that will come in and say, I want this snake. And then, do you have a setup for it? And of course, they say yes.
Oh,
Whether
they say yes.
They say yes. Whether they have a setup or not, they're going to say yes. And then they walk out the door with it. And of course, we don't give a warranty on the animal.
Right.
And the worst thing that could happen with that is, of course, we say you put it on the floor between your feet, crank the air conditioner, and go straight home. It's those people that decide to stop at Walmart on the way home and leave the snake in the car. And of course, 20 minutes later, a snake that I've had for a year is dead.
Right.
And of course, then you get the people that come back and say, hey, we want our money back. You sold us a bad snake. And then you get all kinds of brouhaha.
Right.
But for the most part, most people don't really know what it takes to do a lot of this, but they're eager to learn.
Yeah.
And they buy a book and they listen to us. And of course, they've got our phone number, so they can call us anytime they want. Right. And if there's a problem, and we get that a lot. We sell baby snakes that have only eaten once or twice in their lives, and we tell them don't feed them for 5 days, and 3 days later they panic, say, I tried to feed the snake and it won't eat. And I said, well, you didn't wait 5 days. It doesn't really matter. We just want them to settle in. So you try next week, and you call me, and they wait a week later, and they feel, oh, yes, it ate fine. And sometimes they don't eat.
Right.
And after a while, we have them bring them back in, and we feed them for them and show them how to do it.
Right, yeah.
But there's, most of our customers are mom, dad, and the kids, and they just want a pet. They just want a pet.
They want something different. Like I was at the shop, because I always like to go shoot new video, and I also like to listen. I don't so much talk to the people. I love to listen. You had a lot of families in last night,
Yeah.
And the kids were like oohing and eyeing, but I could also hear the parents going, Now you realize that you're going to have to take care of this pet, and I run into that in the dog world too, where I'm hanging out with dog people, and I think one of the kind of scariest things is when parents or adults are buying, he's coming out, are buying pets for their kids and thinking that the kids are going to take care of them, where the parents don't know how to take care of them. Okay, here we go, folks.
Oh, no,
He's making his appearance. This is our surprise guest today. Now, what are we looking at here?
All right, well, this is an African crested porcupine. I'm not going to bother you. It's a giant porcupine.
Well, he's not giant now.
No, he's not giant now. He's only about, hey, come here. Hey, you.
Okay, he was napping quietly before we interrupted him. But what I thought was so unique, when I hope he can do it today, was if I didn't know he was a porcupine, I would think he was a puppy, because the way he was interacting and being petted and the sounds that he makes are just amazing. It's like hearing from a puppy. Look, here he comes. Is that adorable or what? Oh my gosh.
So this is an African crested porcupine, and it's captive bred. We've had it since it was 10 days old. It was bottle fed. Now we're giving it its formula in the bowl, which he's too excited about to drink. But we thought that would bring him out. Yeah. But he likes to play with everything.
Yes.
So they're very, very playful and very interactive with people. These guys live for about at least 20 years. And but the key with these guys is they get huge. These things are going to get.
When you say huge, how big?
We're talking 50, 55 pounds.
Well, how much does he weigh right now?
Oh, maybe a pound and a half, maybe.
How fast do they grow? And I'm trying to compare it to, if you have an Akita puppy, it only stays small for about a month. And then they go overnight, and they're huge. Is that going to be the same thing with this porcupine?
I think so, because he's only about 3 weeks old.
Uh-huh.
And he's already tripled in size since we've had him.
Wow.
The real tell was Jim, who was on the show once before. Mm-hmm. He went on vacation for a week, and want to play with it? Come over there. And he came back and went, oh my God, it's doubled in size.
Wow.
So
because you guys are seeing it every day and not really recognizing how much you.
So it gets very, very big, and the quills don't come out.
Okay.
Like a North American porcupine. It's right here. But
he's not ready for his close-up.
But the way they defend themselves is they could raise those quills, and eventually, when he's full grown, he'll raise these almost like a peacock tail. He raises them up really, really broad and pointed backwards. And when they're being attacked by something, they turn around and they back up into it full speed.
Oh, is that what it is?
And stab them with those quills.
I think like a lot of people, they think that they shoot them out, but they're
not. Even North American porcupine don't really shoot the quills out. Right. What happens is you connect with the quills and they automatically eject.
Ah, okay. But you have to make contact with these.
Yes. And it doesn't do it. You got to shoot your weapons, and then you have them.
Yeah, right.
So these quills don't come out, but the quills, when we have adults in, the back quills are like this long. They're like almost 2 feet long. And they're soft when they're born. When they come out, thank God for the mother. And that
was my thought too when you told me that. It's like,
well, of course they come out head first, so the quills are facing the other way. But
vaginal birth might be an issue.
But they get very, very big, and they're very playful.
Yes.
And I've always, and I think I've been wrong doing it, but I compare them to a giant guinea pig with quills. Only guinea pigs won't play like this guy. The bigger ones, they chase me, and I chase them, and I'll back up, and it will bounce forward, like you saw it doing yesterday, and then I'll charge it, and it will bounce back, and then it spins around and fans out its quills, and backs up at me, and it's just playing.
Right.
But it's just going, come on, sucker, get a little bit closer. Let me do this. And like I said, they do shed the quills just like people shed hair. And so you'll find big quills in the cage, but back in he goes. Yeah. I'm actually happy he's being like this. He's never been out of his.
So this is like
cage.
A big deal for him.
This is his coming out party, because he's never.
You saw it here first on the Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. I mean, you never know with Ken. This is fantastic. Yeah. So that was the thing I really loved, and I hope he does it during the show, because he was grunting and making sounds like a puppy. I mean, if you just closed your eyes, you would think that Ken was petting a puppy yesterday. It was just so beautiful, and the little kids around, they were just so amazed. I was amazed by it.
I think he's just a little too confused.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's too much. We started him out in this Rubbermaid container so that we could. Yes. Do you want to be scratched? No.
Now, what do they normally eat in the wild, and what do you feed them in
these guys in the wild are pretty much vegetarians. They eat bark, they eat sticks, they eat branches, they eat leaves, they eat grass, seeds that are on the ground, things like that. And they'll also eat fruit when it falls from the trees. What we've been feeding him is, of course, he's still on the formula. We don't have to bottle feed him anymore. The problem with the bottle feeding is he wants to play with the bottle more than he wants to eat. So he attacks the nipple, and he attacks the bottle, and he attacks your hand, and he's just playing. And it was hilarious, because you hold out the bottle, he comes running up, and he'll take about 4 or 5 sucks, and they go, and then attack the bottle. And so we found that we couldn't really feed him that way too much. So one day we're taking him back and forth home because he had to be fed every like 3 or 4 hours. And I finally just went, why don't we just pour some formula in a bowl and see what he does. And sure enough, he drinks it all down. He'll usually go through, we don't use this bowl, but a bowl slightly larger than this, and he'll drink about 4 bowls of this a day, which is funny too, because he'll drink it, and I usually put some canned sweet potatoes in with it, and he'll drink it and eat it, and then it's just kind of like he just teeters over and just goes, and just lays there. He's stuffed with food.
Well, can you bring the sweet potato out, see if he'll come after it?
Hey, you.
Because right before the show, he was just like grabbing for it and snatching it. I took a video of it. It was just too funny. He was like, "This is mine," and running for it. Here he comes. I don't know. I'm not sure. Nah.
He already had it.
He had enough.
Hey, come back out here.
Now, who are your clients here in Las Vegas? Because again, you have people that you ship to all over the world. But here in Las Vegas, is there like a local demand for a porcupine? Who wants a porcupine?
Not really. And that's the other problem you have is, of course, you have the laws in the area. I mean, this is illegal in North Las Vegas.
Right.
It's illegal to have it in Henderson. In Clark County, you got to be zoned for it. I'm still not real sure how that works, because you get people that have exotics and they're zoned for exotics, and they still make them not take them, keep them. In Las Vegas, you can have this
In the city of Las Vegas.
In the city of Las Vegas, you can have this with a permit, and chances are that we probably won't sell this to someone here. We had some people up from Arizona yesterday that we're looking at it, and they may come back up for it. We may ship this thing all the way to Pennsylvania for all we know. We advertise it all over the country, and of course, if we need to ship it, we're gonna have to wait until the weather drops. But we don't mind. We like playing with it.
Sure.
Hey, what are you doing? Why don't you come out here and see us, you
Well, see, that's the thing.
stuck-up
Like,
sticky Pete?
growing up, of course, I was very familiar with snakes and lizards. I simply wasn't, until I started hanging out with you and the folks at the shop about all of the different, when you say exotic animals, all of the different species. And then I love to go in there and try to figure out who would want this as a pet. Because for me, especially when you're talking about this porcupine, can be at least half of a Kira's size. So we're talking about a fairly good-sized animal.
One of my best friends lives in Sparks, and he's got one of these, and it's a full-grown female, and she's huge. And he carries it around like it's a big cat.
Really?
And he loves on it, and he pets it and stuff. And if you play it, it'll pull up its quills. But when it's being all lovey-dovey, the quills are all flat. And he posts a picture of it all the time.
Right.
So, but he's a big animal lover. And so it's people like you and I that would have this. This is an animal that normally when I talk especially about reptiles, unless you're going with a big snake or a really big lizard, your average reptile is going to take 1/10 of the space as a dog or a cat. So
And they're going to be in a confined environment.
Yeah.
You've got to have the cage.
But if you're lacking in space, if you have an apartment or something, you have room for a small reptile to keep it properly. This is as big as a Cocker Spaniel or bigger. This is going to be a big like a big dog. So you need to be prepared for it. The best thing that I could imagine with this animal is to keep it outside. You can build a big pen for it, and set it up properly with shade and water feature, and of course in the winter you're going to have to heat it because these animals come from South Africa, so it gets cold there. I was there last year, and it was I was freezing a few days, but it doesn't get as cold as here. And
people are always surprised how cold Las Vegas gets in the wintertime.
Then
you have to factor in what's cold to us, like me. Factoring what was hot to me was scorching to my dogs in the car. So what's cold to you might be actually uncomfortable for them.
Well, that's why I moved to Las Vegas when I lived in Virginia City, Nevada. And that's outside of Reno for you people who don't know.
Northern Nevada.
But I lived at 7,200 feet. It snowed up there every month out of the year. Never stuck in the summer, but it snowed. And I was big into varandas, which are the fancy word for monitor lizards. And everybody kept bugging me, well, you live in Nevada, you should be breeding varandas outside. And I'm like, I live at 7,200 feet. I'd be breeding nothing outside. And they said, well, then move. And after a while, I went, I think I will.
Yeah.
So I moved down here. I bought 10 acres in Sandy Valley and set it all up for a big monitor breeding facility. I hadn't done my research properly. Started setting all this stuff up, and of course I discovered that it is about 20 degrees too hot here in the summer and about 20 degrees too cold in the winter. It can't be done. And so unless you've got a lot of money going to heat panels and air conditioning and all this stuff. Right. So, of course, I moved everything indoors, and I went, well, why do I have this 10 acres? So I sold it, and I moved into town. Mm-hmm. So it was an hour drive to work every day. Right. And but you could set this up outdoors, but this animal could easily live indoors. Now, I've never owned one in my house. I'm not, I don't have a permit for it at my house. But the only thing I would be concerned about is if you have this thing running around unsupervised, what's it going to do to your house? Is it going to chew up your drapes, your carpet? Is it going to chew up your table legs?
It's just like having a rabbit. Letting your rabbit run free is dangerous. And
this thing is a porcupine, and of course they eat bark for a living.
Right.
So chewing through a table leg ain't going to be an issue. So I would be worried about something like that. It's just like I tell people with ferrets, or people get big possums, or almost any other hedgehogs, sugar gliders. A lot of people want to let them go in their house. And of course, there's all kinds of problems with sugar gliders. You sit on them if they're under the cushion. But I always tell people, let them out for a while is okay. Right. As long as they're supervised. Right. But you turn around, you let a rabbit out, you turn around and it chews through an electrical cord behind your couch, and you've got either a dead rabbit, or even worse, a burned down house.
Right.
And so it's not good. And the other thing too is that your living room is not the proper habitat for anything. Right. Probably not even people. Right. But I mean, I've run into a lot of people who said, well, I want to take this iguana or this monitor or whatever, and I want to let it run loose in the house. I said, well, here's the problem is these animals come from, despite the fact they live in the dirt, come from a very clean, very warm place. And then you have to ask, where is the dirtiest place in your house? It's the floor. What's the coldest place in your house? The floor. So you're taking these animals that live in very warm, very clean places, and you're putting them in the dirtiest, coldest place in your house.
Right.
And we constantly nag people about that because, well, I got a spare bedroom, I'm just going to let it run loose. Well, you can do that, but there's no heat, there's no way to thermoregulate. Average temperature of a house in the summer is about 65 degrees because everybody cranks the air conditioner way up. And we found that people who don't adjust their heat, even in the enclosures, to what they're keeping their house at, we found that more people have upper respiratory infections on their animals in the winter than they do in the summer, because they've got that thermostat cranked so far down. And then, of course, in the summer, they turn it off.
Right.
And so the temperature rises. But in the winters, when you really have all these health issues with colds and stuff, are you going to come back out?
He's thinking about it. But you raised a really good point. People really need to keep into consideration. I think maybe it was like earlier this past year when there was the big brouhaha here in the Valley over exotic pets in general. And one of the things that I didn't realize is that I live in the city of Las Vegas on one street out of the county. And then the county had far more lenient at that time regulations, right. And that was a big issue here in Southern Nevada. So for a lot of people, it's also an educational process. I mean, I kind of got away from the whether it was good or bad, right or wrong. I thought, you know what, I grew up here. I'm from Vegas. I had no idea that there were some municipalities that did accept. I thought everybody could have exotic pets. Everybody could have a snake, a reptile, a porcupine, whatever they wanted to, but they didn't. So it's really important to find out, first of all, what the regulations are in the municipality that you live in.
And you are, I'm amazed at how many people don't know where they live.
I know.
They don't know where they live.
No, yeah.
And I'll constantly say, well, where do you live? Las Vegas. I said, are you in the county, the city? I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how do you vote? You know, if you don't know where you live. And of course, the answer is simple, they don't. But
Because everything, even to the rest of the world, all of Southern Nevada is Las Vegas. They don't
Yes.
see any sort of differences in
Well-
different cities or different the county versus the city, different cities. It's just all Las Vegas. And people who move here, they think it's all Las Vegas. Or I live in Summerlin, and I'll say, no, you live in the county. And then here's another thing. Depending on what part of Summerlin you live in, you might live in the city or the county, because our maps, when it comes to zoning, are just
and especially where my shop is, the city county lines go like this, or like a comb teeth.
Right.
And the easiest way up near where our store is for me to ask is, I just say, do you have a sidewalk? I said, no. I said, you're in the county. Because every street in the city has sidewalks.
Right.
Almost every city in the county has sidewalks, but there's some that don't.
Right.
So, do you have a sidewalk? No. I said, well, then you're in the county for sure. But you got to kind of keep up with it. The county's changed a lot of ordinances in the last
Right.
year or two. We had someone call the shop the other day and asked if there is a county law that says how many reptiles they can own.
Right.
Now, as far as I know, no, there's not. I said, why? How many do you have? And he says, well, I've got 17 reptiles. And I said, I don't see an issue.
Right.
But he was talking to someone from Child Protective Services for some reason, and they were telling them that there's a regulation in the county that limits the number of reptiles you can have. And I said, well, you should really be calling the county.
Right.
I said, better off, of course, if these people are claiming there's a law written. I said, make them produce it in writing.
Yeah.
I said, you don't
Send
have
it on email
I
or
said,
find it.
don't do your homework.
Right.
They're saying that the law says you can't have 17 reptiles with your children. I said, make them come up with a law in writing
Right.
that shows it.
Right.
And so but even the cities and the counties don't really know the regulations all that well. They try.
And this is something that I found out the last time I actually covered the city and the county had remember the pet shop bans? They wanted to ban the sale of pets, dogs and cats.
Dogs and cats, yeah.
From pet shops. Well, what happened was when it actually came up to in the county, they'd already passed it, but in the city, when it came up for a vote, the commissioners and the council people realized that what they were trying to do is to stop puppy mills with this ban. That the ordinances that they wrote absolutely did nothing to stop
Nothing
the
at all.
puppy mills. All it did was put legitimate business owners out of business.
Correct.
And when that actually came to the forefront, I thought, covering politics here in Southern Nevada for as long as I had, that was probably one of, I think, the proudest moments I had of all of these elected officials, where they were able to look out at the audience, at all of their constituents, and admit that they had passed ordinances or were considering ordinances that they didn't even understand, that were written by, in many cases, their staff. Because what they do is they tell the staff, go and write these ordinances for us and bring them back. And so they hadn't actually examined what the ramifications were of these new rules that they were putting in effect. And in both cases, they said, you know what, we're going to take another look at these ordinances and make sure that they're fair.
Well, not to get political, but also when they reevaluated it, two of the city councilmen
people.
that had pushed this ordinance were no longer on the city council.
Right.
And they were replaced by more conservative people. Now what they've done, not to complain, but I might as well let people know. So they just passed a new ordinance, the city, which requires that all dogs and cats be fixed before they can be sold.
Right.
I'm all for it.
Sure.
That's fine. But they threw in potbelly pigs, which is okay, and they threw in rabbits. Disaster. We used to sell 100 rabbits a month.
Right.
Now I sell 0, because to fix a rabbit is about $200.
Right.
I sell the rabbit for $60. No one is going to give me $260 for a rabbit. And the other thing about it is this happened in June, I haven't been notified by the city yet. No one sent me any written regulations. No one has visited and said this is the new law. So I don't know if the law is in effect or if it's not in effect, but all I know is I've quit selling rabbits because all I need is to get in. Of course, I can't get it shipped in now anyway, but shipped in 40 or 50 Netherland dwarfs, and the city comes in and says you have to get rid of all these because they're not fixed.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, well. So I've quit selling them, and that was a big part of our income.
Right.
A colleague of mine in Mesa, Arizona has a pet store down there, and he says rabbits are his #1 selling pet. Now, I understand we also have a problem with the rabbits running loose.
Exactly. In fact, we've talked about this on the show. Apparently in the Summerlin area, they're having some of the, they call them villages up there, some of the villages are having, because, you know, what's the stereotype of rabbits is true. They've got these rabbits out there who are just having babies and just having a great time.
And this is negligence on the owner's part.
Sure.
Because, you know, if we sell a rabbit to somebody and they decide they don't want it, we'll take it back.
Right.
We have no problem with it. We use a lot of rabbits in our business,
Right.
not necessarily as pets, but you know, we sell 4 or 5 rabbits a week to the raptor rehabilitators, and they use them to feed owls and hawks and eagles and stuff like that. They actually throw out a whole rabbit into the pen, and the bird simulates diving on it and killing it and tears it up and eats it just like they would in the wild. Where they're trying to teach them how to hunt again so they can let them go back out.
Right.
So we use rabbits for a lot of food sources, but which sounds horrible, but
Yeah.
they are what they are. You know, we had a man for years, a very old black man from Louisiana, and he would come into my store every Sunday and buy a rabbit. And I'll see you next Sunday, and off he'd go. And after about 2 or 3 times, I had this newer employee, and she says, "What kind of snake does he have?" I went, "Oh, he's afraid of snakes. He doesn't have a snake." "Well, what is he doing with those rabbits?" I said, "Well, he's a gentleman from the South. He's going home, and he's having rabbit stew, or he's frying them up, or he's doing whatever."
Right.
"What? He's killing and eating them?" And I went, "Well, yeah, you weren't complaining when someone fed it to a big snake."
Right.
I
Right.
said, and unfortunately, he must have died. He was really old,
Right.
because I haven't seen him in probably 10 years. But every Sunday, he would come in and make rabbit stew or whatever. I didn't ask, because the thing is, the rabbit's either going to go as snake food, or it's going to go in his belly. And we sell frozen rabbits, which is the way I prefer feeding them to snakes. But and we'd always offer him a frozen rabbit. He says, "No, I like mine fresh." And I'm like, "Okay."
I'm laughing because when I first moved into my house, and I live off Lone Mountain in Jones, and I didn't realize that at the time that I was literally 1 street out of the county and 2 streets out of North Las Vegas. I was one of those, like, sort of like, what do you say, the teeth, little pockets that jut out, you know, until the chimps escaped. And you guys, if you want to look about, just Google Buddy and CJ.
Oh, yeah,
You'll
that
know
was
that
horrible.
story.
Yeah.
Well, when I first bought, they lived across the street from this guy who had at least 2 dozen goats. Now, over the years, the goats were disappearing. The herd got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I just didn't really pay attention because, you know, it's like that part of the city and the county where I live, lots of people have all kinds of animals. I mean, we had a lion. This guy used to walk his lion on a leash. Yeah, right. So, so when I went to go cover the story of the chimps that escaped, I was talking to this guy and said, "You know, whatever happened to this guy across the street from you? Whatever happened to all his goats?" He said, "Well, he ate them." I said, "What?" Yeah, he said in the morning he'd get up and he might find like some hooves sticking out of the dumpster for public services or what. Over the years, the guy had been eating they were well raised and they were really healthy.
I've eaten a few goats in
There
my
you
day.
go, you know. So, but I think that's also something that, for a lot of people, especially if you're not really into, if all you're into are domesticated dogs and cats, it's easy to forget that what we call exotic animals are these
It's food
animals.
somewhere else.
There's food somewhere else, and these folks are in the wild, and it's sort of like, you know, kill or be killed, or you're either a predator or you're lunch.
See, I should have taken that kettle off a long
See,
time
look, there
ago.
he goes. Hi, sweetie.
And I was like, where do I hide? But, well, I have a friend here I'm not real fond of, but he has python meat imported from Vietnam. And he barbecues pythons.
Ooh.
And it's, I've eaten snake before. It's not my cup of tea, but he'll have two grills going. You know, have one with beef and pork and chicken or whatever. You have the other grill going with llama and alpaca or ostrich or python for his more exotic tasting people. The funny thing, of course, is at the end of the night, all the beef and pork and chicken is gone. He's still got a big plate of the python meat because no one wants to eat it. And I'm not real fond of it either. It doesn't taste real well, but I've eaten almost everything you possibly can imagine. When I travel so much, and when you're in the jungle overseas, and they offer you a bowl of grubs, you eat them,
Right.
or you go hungry.
Right.
And it's not that I was fond of them. They weren't bad. They were kind of
Well,
tart.
I think there are two things that I think have contributed to my obsession with exotic animals. First of all, my dad, of course, career military, one of my very first memories of a reptile was we lived in the Philippines, and we lived right outside of Clark Air Force Base at the time, and I remember walking out on the carport, and there was this magnificent snake curled up, because our backyard was up against the jungle, basically, and it'd come out to cool off on the carport. And I went walking toward this snake, and I don't remember what kind of snake it was, but our house girl came screaming out of the house, no, 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 no. It was like, and I just remember at that moment, I think it was 5, going, I want one of those, and one day I will have them. Then, growing up with ABC's Wild Kingdom, I was fascinated with that show, watching how animals really live in the wild. And so I never had that, I think, again, to the people who only have dogs and cats, this separation from how do animals, act in the wild as opposed to what we expect in our own neighborhoods. Because if you say that even people who like the dogs get into a fight, they're just horrified, this is terrible. Well, it might be an instinctive thing. You don't really know what happened with these dogs. It doesn't mean you have a bad dog. You just might have...
I never try to break up a dog fight.
Right.
I got bit real bad.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. But it's. I think that sometimes people sort of project the domesticated expectations of domesticated animals on wild animals.
Well, and there's a lot of, I mean, if you go to the upper Amazon, you'll find people habitually they have monkeys as pets, and these are people who have no electricity or running water or indoor plumbing or anything. They're out there in the woods, and they're hunter gatherers. They farm a little bit, but they go out and they shoot the animals and stuff. But they've got baby monkeys running around, and they've got baby sloths hanging off of their things, and they've got tortoises plodding around. And
this is their norm.
This is their norm, and these are their pets. There are no cages, unless they want to try to sell you something. Now, they'll try to sell you a monkey, which of course is illegal. You can't bring one back home. But
Right.
but they live around these animals all the time, and that baby sloth that's hanging on that roof today may be in a stew tomorrow. They have no compunction at all about killing the things.
Well, what my mother's thing was, because we actually did 2 tours in the Philippines, and she would just say, okay, baby, even if it was lumpia, which is like, the Filipino version of egg roll, like, baby, 2 things. Don't ask, long before don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask, and just bless your food.
That's it.
You don't know what is the meat source that's in the lumpia. Just keep on eating it. Does it taste good?
I still do this to this day. I'm not allowed to order sushi.
Why?
Because I order too much, and they get very angry because I don't eat it all. But I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know what it is. So when I go somewhere, whether it's my girlfriend or colleagues or whatever, we go for sushi, and the people who've known me for years, they just know, oh, what'd you like, sir? And he's going to have part of ours. I don't ask what's in it. I just take a piece, and I shove it in my mouth, and I chew it up,
good?
and I swallow it. If it's good, I try each one of each.
Right.
If it's good, I'll go back to it. If none of them are good, I'm done. And but it's that's the interesting thing about us. We keep a lot of animals as pets that other people don't consider pets too. Everybody thinks we should be keeping dogs and cats, and that's it.
Right.
But this animal right here, it's unique. It's different. Its parents were captive bred. Its grandparents were captive bred. It's captive bred. All it knows is people. And what I try to determine is, when we posted this online on Facebook, most everybody, oh my God, he's so cute. But you get those people that go, how horrible, how dare you cage this animal, let it back in the wild. Well, first of all, it comes from South Africa. It's never been to South Africa in its life, and neither of its parents or grandparents. But really, when you get right down to it, what is the difference between this and a puppy?
Right.
It's just different.
Yeah.
It's like I've always said about kangaroos and wallabies. A wallaby gets about the size of a Cocker Spaniel. The big difference is it doesn't bark, it doesn't bite, and it's a vegetarian. And stop that. It's going to eat your... No, you don't need to eat the tablecloth.
He won't be the first.
Don't eat the tablecloth. Don't. Yeah, you turn your back on me. That's okay. I'll
If you're
argue.
just joining us now, Ken Foose of Exotic Pets. He's right across, almost down the street from the North Las Vegas airport, and it's right there on the corner, pretty much, of Rancho and Decatur. And if you're thinking about an exotic pet, go into the store and see what he has and talk to his staff. They're very, very knowledgeable. Half the time you're going to walk in and they're carrying these pets around, and it's just really fun. And we don't really have anything that resembles a zoo here in Southern Nevada, so this is your opportunity to get up close and personal. I mean, this is my first porcupine. This is like great. When I called him and said, "Oh, Ken, I'd like to have you on the show," and he goes, "Well, what do you want me to bring?" I said, "Well, what do you have?" "I've got a porcupine." I was already sold. The first wallaby I ever saw in person was I was there at his shop for a story about something else, and this little wallaby comes hopping around. I'm thinking, really? This is fantastic. So I sometimes just drop in just to see what you've got, but because we don't have a zoo, and he's so well versed in the regulations, the laws, and what these animals actually need to survive and thrive. So if you're thinking about an exotic pet, go to the man who knows all of these species, who's been studying them, and who's also, what I love about you, which you said this earlier in the show, continuing education. You don't think you know it all about these animals.
I know nothing. I mean, what I know is so much of a fraction of what there is to know. I'm an idiot, and I know more than the average person. Sure. Because this is what I do.
Right.
But what I know about animals is just barely scratching the surface.
Really quickly, as we're winding down the show, you got a few minutes more. Just catch up people up to date. How did you even get into exotic animals? How did you go from pet stores to this?
Well, you'd actually mentioned it. Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I would watch that every Sunday before Disney came on.
Oh yeah, right.
And there's Marlon Perkins and Jim Fowler, and they're doing all this stuff and catching all all these animals. Marlon Perkins was actually not only the director of the St. Louis Zoo, but he was the curator of reptiles at the St. Louis Zoo.
I didn't know that.
And now Fowler just kind of worked for him. But yes, I know. But Perkins was a herpetologist like I am, and I would watch him on TV and see what I'll do. So I'm 9 years old. I'm out in my backyard in Missouri. All these kids are gathered around, and there's this snake crawling. I'd always liked animals anyway. There's a snake crawling in the leaves. It's fall, and this little snake about this big. And I went, well, how did Marlon Perkins do that? And I grabbed it, thinking I'm going to grab it behind the back of the head. Well, I grabbed it about halfway down his back, and he turned around and bit me. I'm 9. I get scratched and bit all day long. Right. And so I put it in a jar, and I walked around, and people would say, what is it? And I'd heard this word somewhere. It's a bull snake. Oh, that's really nice. Well, of course, what I didn't know was it was actually a copperhead.
And you were in big trouble.
And my hand was slow. Well, I went out and played for 4 hours. And my hand was slowing up more and more and more and more. So I went to the hospital, of course, and I obviously lived. And I decided to read up on, I had my mother bring me every book she could on snakes. My goal being to learn everything I can about them so I can kill them all. And by the time I got done, I'm like, these things are really cool. So I'm more of a reptile person, and that's my favorite thing. Mammals are cool, but they're way too much work for me. But years later, I'm the curator of reptiles at the zoo in Spokane. And they said, we have some dignitaries coming, and we'd like you to escort them around and show them the zoo site, because I also lived on the zoo site. I was security. And down the trail comes Marlon Perkins.
Oh my gosh.
And
I'm so jealous.
And I had
Did you fall out? Did you totally fanboy
No,
him?
I jumped to shit. I walked up to him and said, it's your fault that I'm where I am now. And I told him the story of catching the snake and all this stuff. And he says, why would you do an idiot thing like that? And I said, because you told me it was okay. And he says, no, I never said do it. I said, I never say do this at home. Now, of course, Marlon has passed, and we were great friends after that. We met many times. But now Jim Fowler still works, even though there's no TV show. He still works for Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Are you serious?
But now they do a lot more They're not in the television shows, but they're doing a lot more conservation work and educational work and outreach. And he travels all over the world. But he comes here to Vegas.
Next time he's here, you have to let me know so we can let people know where they can go and meet him, because I want to go meet him.
What he does now is he does a lot of conventions. But he'll come to town. He borrows animals from me. Last time he borrowed a python and a hedgehog and I think a leopard gecko or something.
Oh, man.
And he goes and drops them off. Takes them and then he brings them back the next day.
Well, and also, before we let you go, the last time he was on, you had some of your animals that were like leased out or borrowed for a photo shoot.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a part of your business too. If they need an exotic animal, they come to you.
We do a lot of movies, and we just did another movie, Terror Bus to Hell Part 2 or something like that. It was
Like Sharknado 15.
Yeah, it was. Have you seen that
John has seen this
Bus
movie.
to Hell thing?
He knows the director. Okay.
It was on. Now I don't go. I have no patience for this anymore. So I send the staff who go, "Oh my God, we get to work on a movie." I went, "Yeah, you go."
It's hard work. It's like sit around and wait forever.
14 hours later, they come back and go, well, "Do I have to do that again?"
Never gonna do it again.
But yeah, we do movie shoots. We do commercials. We just did some rich kid's blog YouTube thing where they had Jim. They paid us for Jim to go to their hotel room. I won't say what hotel because we kind of snuck them in, and covered them in spiders as they were tied up on a bed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I saw the video, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs, and Jim is very patiently putting tarantulas and scorpions on them, and he says, "What do you think?" I said, "I would have just thrown the whole bucket on him at the first scream and went, I'm out of here," and I would have left. But how are you?
Well, as you can tell, I always enjoy having Ken on because it's just a great opportunity, as I said, for you to, if folks, if you would just like something different, go down, educate yourself about the species that you're thinking about adopting and bringing into your home, because until last night and definitely today, I never would have thought about a porcupine as a pet, but now it's a consideration. So go down, see how he just chuckles and walks around literally like a puppy. But this is a puppy that's going to get to be about 50 pounds. Just know that if you want a porcupine.
Yeah, just if you guys want to come to the store, just pop on down on us. It's a nice place.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to hang out on a Sunday afternoon with the kids.
It really is.
And that's what we mostly get on Sunday afternoons is mom, dad, and the kids. But we're at 2410 North Decatur, which is right near the corner of Decatur and Smoke Ranch, and we're open from 10 to 7, and then on Sunday from 11 to 5.
Right.
And I take Sundays off because there's all those people there. But it's football season coming up. I got to take the day off.
Do what you have to do.
But this guy will be here until someone sells him, and we've got some pretty cool birds, and of course we've got, like I said, about 3,000 animals in the building. He's making your noise.
See, there you go. Now he's finally comfortable. We should have probably put him on the desk earlier. I want to thank my guest today, Ken Foose of Exotic Pets. Always a fantastic time. And thank you, little unnamed porcupine, for not trying to break for freedom or forcing me to use the gloves in self-defense. Such a sweetheart. Go down, visit, and just see what the range is of of Mother Nature on this planet. It's really fun. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. And if you want to get down and see this porcupine, get down there soon, because he had the macaw for how many days before the macaw was snapped up?
About 5 days.
About 5 days.
Yeah.
So it's no guarantee that this porcupine is going to be there, because the hedgehogs went. Everything goes at the really neat and really exotic animals tend to go pretty quickly.
We hear that one of the others is pregnant now, so we'll probably get that baby too. Look at him. See,
More
now he's
porcupines.
playing.
There you go. You'll see it right here on Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.
See ya.